Welcome to the exciting episode of Shotgun Saturday Night. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 7, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a full month, ladies and gentlemen, since I started the series, and to be honest, well, it's interesting. To be honest, guys, this one, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going back using my old, well, somewhat, well, to be honest, I might as well have to tell you people the truth. Oh, well, what's that up here I'm looking at, huh? Well, yeah, I'm actually using my computer camera. I'm using my computer camera, taking a break from my phone because this uses so much gigabytes. Like every time I record a 5-minute video on this phone, I get 1 gigabyte. A full hour, I get 10 gigabytes. This thing can barely store 15 gigabytes, which is funny, but yet again, that's the way it goes. But even my screen capture, because I am using this on screen capture as I'm recording, so yeah, can't argue with that, ladies and gentlemen. Shotgun Saturday Night is officially underway, ladies and gentlemen. Well, I guess this area is a little bit different. This is a little bit awkward for me to record this stuff, but yet again, guys, if I'm trying to use up a little bit of gigabytes and save up stuff, then might as well make my screen just a little bit wider here. Technically, guys, I'm already going to take this announcement. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's get to professional bare knuckle boxing. So, guys, if you people don't know much about SSN, Shotgun Saturday Night, this series, SSN, which is, there is a playlist of this. This is the history of bare knuckle boxing. Now, guys, bare knuckle boxing is somewhat of an illegal sport that was illegal, and actually there is some stuff out there that are like not much of records in today's world. So it's if you guys haven't seen this, it's mostly as a old traditional thing that used to be professional boxing until gloves were made during the Queensberry rules. And speaking about the Queensberry rules, the Marquess of Queensberry, which I'll look this up. The Marquess Queensberry rules of boxing. That was the Queensberry rules of boxing was mostly established in 1867, where rules formalized the sport of boxing. So that's what I'm going to talk about, ladies and gentlemen, for the history. I will talk about the new rankings of the professional boxers in the heavyweight division of bare knuckle boxing. But before we get to that, let's talk about the history of how bare knuckle boxing came to an end. So guys, to understand the Marquess of Queensberry rules in boxing and how it destroyed bare knuckle boxing for the better of it. And guys, last week ago, as I uploaded the documentary of talking about, well, not the documentary, but talking about my opinion about the YouTube channel Vice, which is a production crew that makes documentaries, which are famous for their episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, do their documentaries in 2015 and in 2018, and recently this year in 2025, talking about bare knuckle boxing as a whole. In the 2018 documentary I talked about last week ago, talked about the promoter of David Feldman and his BKFC, the American bare knuckle division of boxing. And there's other divisions out there that have their own names, like BYB, BKB, I think, and such. And so there's different divisions out there. Keep that in mind. Bare knuckle boxing today is the same organizations as MMA fighting and professional wrestling, because in MMA, we don't have MMA as all professional fights are legal to fight in all organizations like promoters, because promoters in professional wrestling and MMA have their own divisions, their own title belts as they are, like WWE, AEW, TNA, and the AEW, well, used to be other promotions like the AWA and the Memphis Wrestling and the Hart Foundation, their own wrestling promotions, had their own champions, and New Japan Wrestling, All Japan Wrestling. They had their own promotions, and the rule is if you if you performed or worked in one company, you can't go to another company unless if you sign out, cashed out, or depending on what you're doing. And that's the same thing for promotions. If you're actually working in Bellator, which is one of the MMA promotions as are still used today, or the Ritz, which is a Japanese promotion which might be taken over to become the big star since Pride passed away in 2007. So similar. So it's not UFC that's the only dominant in MMA. There's other famous MMA shows out there. And bare knuckle boxing is the same. And why am I talking about this? Well, professional boxing do have their own promoters like Eddie Hearn, Frank Warren, Bob Arum, Dimitri Salida, Don King, obviously. But mostly they are battling against each other in their own promotions because guys, boxing does not have a strict rule of champions because the organizations of the alphabetical of the WBA, WBO, WBC, and IBF, and many other organizations of the IBO, WBF, UBO, and also a few of the Germany and Europeans have the same thing, all have their own alphabetical titles, which are minor weight belts, just like how other, because guys, the IBF have their own divisions, like the USBA, and then there's also other divisions like the NABF, North American Boxing Federation, and the North American Boxing Association, the NABA. All of them are fighting against other boxers from other promotions. So it's like last year ago, Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren were battling each other in an interpromotional contest. The thing is, they don't have their promotions. They don't have their own championships. They're not working with any of the alphabetical companies that are the world champions. Even the weight classes are a lot. So so technically they're different. MMA, bare knuckle boxing, boxing, and MMA and professional wrestling, they have their own different cakes that might be different in their own way because professional wrestling might not be a real sport, but people do get hurt. And you have professional boxing and MMA, which do have people that do get hurt, and there might be controversies of fights that are fixed. And professional wrestling could have moments like the Montreal Screwjob and moments where someone got hurt in the ring or someone died in the ring, and that's not something we should see when it's all an act, but it gets real quickly. At the end of the day, those are the way sports go. And I think that's the reason why combat sports are the most controversial with all those categories. And bare knuckle boxing is no different. And I know I've been talking for 8 minutes about this, so how about we get to the story of how the Marquess of Queensberry changed boxing because of this. So as I said before, the Queensberry rules were established in 1867, about a couple years after the Civil War ended. But other things were coming differently at the time, so keep that in mind. I won't get into it because talking about the Marquess of Queensberry, it's not in America. So keep that in mind. So they were established as a formalized sport of boxing. They introduced the rules of gloves, replacing bare knuckles. And rounds were timed. Now, back in the old days, guys, were rounds actually timed in bare knuckle boxing? There is going to be some moments I will talk about that. Because, as said before, guys, professional, like bare knuckle boxing, where always the rules are that the person that knocks down the opponent is a champion. Rounds, time limits were that like I think they were rounds and time limits back then. I think during the more earlier time. But yeah, guys, it's almost the same thing as the Clint Eastwood movie. Like I think it was the Clint Eastwood movie. Like, you know those two films of Clint Eastwood doing bare knuckle fighting and they have their chimpanzee. Like what's the movie called? Anyway, Anyway, Which Way But Lose, which was their second film that came out in '78. Which I like the film, but actually their other film, the first one was better. I forgot what that. I keep forgetting what the first film was called. Actually, I forgot what the first film was called because of it. Oh boy. Oh yeah, man, Smokey the Bandit was there at the time. Jeez, whatever happened to great movies back then? Sheesh. Oh boy, I keep forgetting. Anyway, which way? But oh boy, what am I looking at? I keep forgetting. I keep forgetting what the first one. Every which way but lose. Yeah, but what was the other? What was the other film that came out? Give me a second, guys. I'm trying to look this up. Like, wait. Jeez, Clint Eastwood is still alive today at 95 years old. That's mad respect. That is mad respect. Wow, 95 years old. At this moment, guys, he's a great dude, actually. Yeah. Here's the film. It's the 1980 film Any Which Way You Can, which came out in 1980, which is actually my favorite film, which is actually the second film after Every Which Way But Lose, which the movie talks about the story of Eastwood playing a guy that's a trucker and a bare knuckle brawler roaming the American West in search of a lost love while accompanied by a brother manager and Orville and a pet orangutan named Clyde. Love it. And of course, everything else. And the Motorcycle Gang, which were pretty fun, the two films. Still, it was crazy. It was actually really sad to see that pickup truck blow up in the second film. Oh boy, that was sad. So yeah, back then was different. So hearing about that information is crazy enough, but that's not the point. The point is, back in those days, you see the movie of Clint Eastwood. He's not fighting in a ring. In those films, they're fighting in meat lockers and in outside areas where a bunch of truck drivers were fighting. In the second film, or him and this other guy fighting, and he broke his hand when the guy like stomped on it in a backroom cafeteria and such. So technically that's what bare knuckle boxing was back in the 1800s. You fight outdoors, you fight in ballrooms or even in bars. Like, that's where you box. Sometimes in outdoors. Pretty much. That's where you fight. And you fight near 4-inch hay barrels. Guys, remember a few weeks ago when I talked about the professional bare knuckle in the 2015 documentary of Vice, where an interviewer went to the UK to interview people, and he went to watch America versus a British fighter colliding each other, and they had multiple fights in a bar where there are nothing but 4x4 wide hay barrels across from a small square. That's what boxing was back then. There were no ropes, rings, or like stuff that we have today. Like, they didn't have that. So that's what it was back then. But of course, the Marquess of Queensberry really tried to make that as best as they can. And back then, guys, eye gouging was a factor back then as well as of today. Keep that in mind. And keep this in mind, guys. They would typically last 3 minutes with 1-minute breaks, as we do today. And a referee does oversees the match, ensuring fair play and safety. Knockdowns are counted, and a fighter can be counted out if they cannot rise by 10. Back in those days, guys, if you had to watch Jack Dempsey take on a large dude and he got knocked down 7 times in the first round, back then referees weren't like, okay, that's enough, stop the fight. All they cared about was just counting. If you don't want to fight again, then you better stay down the count of 10 or you're dead. It's not like the time back in the 1920s, one of Jack Dempsey's title fights he fought against. He knocked down a guy. He knocked him down 11 or 10 or 11 or 13 times in the first round, and this guy still got back up. Back in those days, when you knock down a fighter, you don't have to go to the neutral corner. You can just stay there a couple inches and wait for the guy to get back up, and then bam, he's down again. But of course, that rule would be implemented in the 1920s. But in bare knuckle boxing, those rules do play differently. So the rules were prohibited certain actions such as hitting below the belt and holding, which were different back then. But here's something I found in Wikipedia. So this is what it was known. So It was accepted of the rules of governing in the sport when drafted in London in 1865 and was published in 1867. So they were named as the ninth Marquess of Queensberry. So the ninth Marquess of Queensberry, mostly the most honorable person that was born. His name was John Sholto Douglas, and he was born around July of 1844 and passed away in the first month of the new decade of the century of 1900, January the 31st. He was remembered for his athleticism and his outspoken views, with his brutish manner, for lending his name to the Queensberry rules, and he was from the base form of the basis of modern boxing, and the rules in the downfall of the Irish Arthur and playwright of Oscar Wilde. So there's nothing much you can say about that other than mostly what you have to say right there, because mostly with everything going on, there wasn't much to be said about anything else about that other than he was the ninth Marquis of Queensberry. So technically, like I said before, they first required the use of gloves, which are more better in today's world, and because you don't have to have your knuckles being brittled, punching someone in a hard steel and having your knuckles being broken, and then having your swellness from here to here for how like that's how your knuckles swollen. Just like the British promoter in the bare knuckle business back in 2015, when the interviewer interviewed the guy on Vice, and it showed him his knuckles from this to the wide of this, of how wide, and like so much of his, like it was so wide. Like I don't know how to explain it, but his knuckles were just, it just goes to show you that hands like these aren't meant to be punching someone in the head. You're damaging your knuckles, your bones and such, and just swelling them so bad, like they're turning into balloons. Like you could just poke them with a little needle and pop and dead. That's how, it's not good. So I think it was a good thing that gloves were used today. And even though David Feldman in the beginning part of their 2018 documentary by Vice did say that gloves aren't protective in bare knuckle, and they talk about how they even believe that like knuckles never killed people as much because it's like these people last over 80 or 100 rounds in a fight. Yeah, but back in those days, men were so different. There's no such thing as internet or TV or even YouTube back then. Today, we have new technology that a lot of people don't even care about doing nothing but looking at their phones 24/7 while in public and texting people instead of looking a person in the eye, which is I like to do a lot. So, yeah, I just think that's the problem when you actually, like, that's a problem. It just goes to show you trying to review out sportsmanship is pretty tough. Now the Queensberry rules which eventually superseded in the London prize fighting was revised in 1853 are intended for use in both professional and amateur boxing matches. And unlike the less popular American fair play rules, which were strictly intended for amateur matches, and Calo QL, huh? Interesting. Whatever that word means. Use, huh? The term is sometimes used to refer to a sense of sportsmanship and fair play. So, yeah. So the history mostly was a while back when they finally implemented something here, but this is when things turned to awry. Because one early prize fighter who fought under the Marquis was named Jem Mace, and we're going to get to him in a different future time. He was a former English champion who defeated Bill Davis in Virginia City, Nevada under these rules in 1876. 1876, keep that in mind. With Mace's enthusiasm for gloved fighting doing much to popularize the Queensberry rules. And then years later, in addition of professional boxing, amateur boxing adopted the Queensberry rules in 1800. The Amateur Boxing Association, ABA, the sport's amateur governing body, was formed in British, and in the following year, the ABA staged the first official amateur championship. The Amateur Athletic Union of the AAU of the USA was formed in 1888 and instituted its annual championship in boxing the same year. And of course, a year later, John L. Sullivan had his last professional bare knuckle fight against Jake Kilrain a year later, and that was the final ever legit major until 2018 or so when American finally came on. Now, of course, we'll get to that information in the future, but yeah, mostly at the time during the 1880s is when it became different. And of course, John L. Sullivan joined out the train and started doing professional boxing around those times as well. And that's when he was heavyweight champion in 1882 in bare knuckle. And few years later, in 1885, he became lineal in a 7-round fight. So my question is, how far are these guys going to go until it's over? How far can you survive when you're boxing those dangerous rounds when it comes to these knuckles? Who knows? Who knows?